Chieftec is a company that we all know from the good old days, and we somehow forgotten them in the process of getting RGB power supplies for cheap. Yet they are still around, and in this review we have the Chieftec Polaris 650W Gold power supply, a new power supply that is aimed towards the gaming and casual user crowd of the market, with a price of around $90 and a fully modular design. However, is this unit enough to make Chieftec relevant on this ever so crowded market? We shall see. The Chieftec Polaris Gold is available in 4 different variants based on the voltage: a 550 watts, 650 watts, 750 and 1050 watts variants. The unit that is the subject of this review is the middle of the pack 650 watts model. In terms of the design, this Chieftec Polaris power supply looks good and similar in many ways with the Seasonic Focus series units, but honestly speaking, it's tough these days to make anything unique when we are talking about a simple square with a fan at the front, so we'll give everyone a pass, and yes, I mean everyone. The Chieftec Polaris 650W Gold is your typical ATX power supply, with a length of 140mm, a width of 150mm and a height of just 87mm. This unit also weighs in at around 2.1 kilograms. The modular connectors which are installed at the back of the power supply are fortunately spaced out to be easier to access and are nicely labeled on the upper side. These things might not look like much, but when a power supply lacks them, then that's when the issues start during the installation process. The cables of the power supply are completely flat and black. This will greatly ease the installation process with this power supply, as flat cables can be easily stacked and thus you save a lot of space at the back of the motherboard tray. In fact, the only cable that is not flat is the main 24-pin motherboard cable, which is only sleeved to match the rest of the cable bundle. Before we go deeper, no pun intended, we need to see what is delivered with this power supply, and apart from the cables we don't have much. We have a power cable, a user manual, a few screws, and that's it. At this price point, some Velcro straps would have been great to see because, well, they aid for cable management and they look good. Also the packaging. It's great to see that the power supply is protected by high density foam inside the cardboard box. Too many times I've seen power supply damaged or dinged during shipping because the protection was subpar. But we can talk about how a power supply looks like until later this evening. The important thing is what is underneath the nice casing, and to do that I will have to open the power supply. And this means voiding the warranty, which is why I am the one doing it, so you don't have to. With the casing removed, we gain easy access to the fan used to cool the internal components of the Polaris 650W Gold. This is a 120mm fan made by PowerDear, and it is the model PY12025 M12S. This fan uses a sleeve bearing system and has a maximum rated speed of 2000 RPM, at least based on its general specifications. It might have been customized with a fan profile for this particular power supply. As is the case with many modern power supply fans, this one is easy to service and replace as it's connected to the PCB of the power supply through a regular fan connector. Although, if the fan breaks for whatever reason, you take your power supply and have it fixed by someone that is specialized, because opening up a power supply that has been powered on can result in either damages or worse. The Chieftec Polaris 650W Gold uses a high power platform for its internal construction. High Power is the same company that is behind the Chieftec brand of power supplies, so we are starting on a good note here. This platform is used by many power supplies and manufacturers. However, the high power platform can and are modified based on the requirements of each manufacturer, hence why you might see some differences. The main capacitor used on this power supply is made by Nichicon, and it is rated for 105 degrees Celsius. The filtering starts at the back of the unit with a couple of X and Y capacitors attached to the line. There is also a relay installed here which will disable the thermistor, limiting the charge current entering the unit. The PWM controller is an NPEC unit with the model number APW7159C. This one is installed on a secondary vertical PCB next to the input port of the power supply. The APFC controller used on the Polaris 650W Gold is made by Infineon and is the model ICE3PCS01G. Apart from the main capacitor, the rest of them are made by Rubicon and Tipo and some other brand that I am unable to identify. As always, power supply testing is not an easy job, as it requires complex equipment and countless hours to get everything dialed in. However, that doesn't mean that it can be done with a regular system, and that's what I'll do. We start with the basic efficiency of the power supply using a system that uses around 500 watts of power at full load. This system uses an Intel i9 9900K CPU and an RTX 2070 Super. The CPU is overclocked to 5 GHz on all cores, while the graphics card is running at its maximum turbo boost frequency. And the Chieftec Polaris 650W coil reached a maximum efficiency of 91.3% with a load of 500 watts. This places this unit next to the Seasonic SGX 650 or the Silencium PC Supremum L2 Gold. Quite a good result. In terms of the voltages under load, these were measured with a multimeter connected to one of the main cables of the power supply, and here everything looks within the normal parameters of this power supply, with no voltage oscillations that can pose issues for the system or for the power supply. And what about the sound? With a 120mm fan, the Polaris 650W coiled reached a maximum noise output of 30 decibels, with the measuring device placed at a standard distance of 10 cm away from the system and the power supply. This is a worst case scenario though, because I was trying to push the power supply as much as I could to increase the fan speed, so your results will be lower in terms of noise output. All this being said, or being seen, what is the competition for the Chieftec Polaris 650W Gold? Unfortunately, units like the Seasonic Focus Plus Gold, which has its very own platform, a much better build quality and an extended warranty period. However, that doesn't make the Chieftec Polaris a bad unit, it's just a different type of power supply. First, the performance is good enough for any gaming system unless we are talking about heavy overclocking or dual graphics card setups, in which case you need a different caliber of power supply. Second, the build quality is good, but the usage of unknown capacitors is not that great. Also, the soldering quality could have been better, and the usage of wires to connect the modular connector PCB to the rest of the power supply PCB is a true letdown. A direct connection between the two PCBs would have been great to see, but it's not here. The Chieftec high power platform is alright, but the Chieftec Polaris is not exactly cheap, and to see a few cut corners is not that great either, because as I said before, this power supply is in competition with the Focus Gold series, which has already established itself as one of the best, especially around this price point. Is the Chieftec Polaris 650W Gold worth it? For 10 or 20 US dollars less? Yes, it is. It's not a bad power supply, it can certainly deliver, but it needs to be competitively priced to hold a candle to the Focus series. If you can have a Polaris 650W Gold for cheaper, you can go for it. It won't disappoint, but if it's the same price as other units from well-established brands, then it's a tough sell and especially a tough buy. If you like this review, then you might consider subscribing for more, and if you want to support me in a direct way, then in the description below you will find the links for both the Patreon and the subscriber pages of this channel.